you've heard this before. The first casualty of war is truth. The truth is killed right off. You know, that's and anything you hear after that, it's
growing up on John Wayne movies and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movie, I was somewhere between a hopeless romantic and a warrior, and decided, yeah, Marines.
I saw a couple of guys crying, you know, that they had passed. They didn't want to pass, you know. Me, I was in the best shape of my life, you know, marching for hours and hours in the band and being in cross country long distance and the practices that the coach used to put us through. I was in tip-top shape, you know. I couldn't go there and say that I was not healthy or that I was a homosexual. So, you know, so they took me, you know. They took me.
My fellow Americans,
I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy.
100 men will test today, but only 3 when the Green Beret.
Rebels drove deeper into Laos today, pushing government troops across.
Well, I show up at the bus depot here in Ventura, and there's like a lot of guys. I don't know how many, maybe a busload of guys, and all of us get on the bus. When we arrived at the induction center on Broadway in Los Angeles, you know, we're still civilians in our civilian clothes, but an Army guy comes onto the bus. His job essentially was to tell us what we were going to go through that day. Then he said something quite interesting. He says, you know, there are some protesters right outside the building there. And he says, well, I'm in uniform, so I can't do anything about it, but you're not. So if you want to pop one of them in the mouth on your way in, that's fine. There was only 2 people. There was a young guy in a wheelchair not saying anything, just with a sign that read, that it said the date and the place in Vietnam that he like stepped on a landmine and lost his legs. And then it had the word resist. Standing next to him was a woman dressed in black, a young woman. Yes, she was 18 because her sign said, I'm 18 and pregnant and a widow. And she listed the dates where her husband was killed in Vietnam, and then the word resist again. Both of them standing there silently. And the thought came to me, I says, so these are the people this guy wants me to pop in the mouth? A guy in a wheelchair or a pregnant woman? And I got a bad feeling. Before I even stepped into that induction center, I had a real bad feeling.
In 1966, I graduated from Ventura High School. My dad told me when I graduated, I was out of the house. I could go to college or go into the military. And so because I moved so often in different school systems and everything, I really did poorly in school, so I knew college was out of the question.
I got my draft notice, even though I didn't, you know, say, no, I'm not going to go or nothing. I'm a student. I do remember vividly, my father, remember, he's from Mexico, and my mother and my father, obviously, they love this country, but they love their son much more. And they had seen all the violence in Vietnam, and they had seen the press and all that.
Basically majored in high school in art, paper pickup, detention, and social adjustment, whatever those things were. So when I graduated, I knew I wasn't ready for college yet, so I decided I needed some discipline, and lo and behold, I joined the Marines at 17.
You know, at that time, you know, we were all brought up with the, you know, the war movies, you know, with John Wayne and one grenade, you know, so I wanted to be a hero and all that stuff.
But my father said, you know, don't go to Mexico. Go to Mexico. We'll find ways to get you to Mexico. And I said, Dad, I'm not from Mexico. I wasn't born there. I don't know anybody. Don't worry about it. We'll find family. I said, I'm sure there's family, Dad. I don't know that family. My whole family, my whole life is here. I have no intention. He said, well, go to Canada. And I said, there's words. There's too many white people there. I remember saying that, you know. I mean, no, it was a different time. I said, you know, no, Dad, I'm going to go.
She kept on trying to, you know, for me not to go, you know. And when I did tell her that I was going to sign up, so I had to look down at her, you know, and she looked up at me, you know, and then she grabbed me by the shirt right here, and she pulled me down, you know, and she put her finger in my face. She says, you want to go in the military? She says, all right. She says, I'm gonna tell you something right now, you know, just pointing right in my face, you know, if you run, you can't go to Mexico, you can't go to Canada, there's no place you can hide. She says, because I'll find you, and she says, and I'll bring you by the ears, and I'll turn you in,
and we sat in this great room, and of course there were lines. You've seen movies and heard about them in books that we had to follow and go through the mental test, emotional test, physical test. And we were herded. We felt we were walking around in our underwear and our chonies. Marine Sergeant came in with another couple of guys and said, we need 6 of you to go into the Marines. We all thought we were going into the Army. And we looked at each other and we thought, hell, we don't want to go there.
I just waited out until I got drafted in 66. Well, yeah, 66. I went down in February. Went through my physical. We were waiting for the buses to take us to Fort Ord. A gentleman came in the room, called out 10 names. Mine was the last. We went into a different room and they said, welcome to the Marine Corps.
I enlisted along with 2 friends of mine. We thought we could get a better deal if we enlisted. Didn't quite turn out that way. But
I joined the Marines because I wanted to join the Marines, but I wanted to paint recruitment posters. And I thought, this is going to be great. And even the recruiter, of course, said, oh yeah, no problem, piece of cake. You'll be an artist in there. You don't have to worry about going to Vietnam. So I was going to sign up for 2 years. I ended up signing up for 3 years.
It's very hard to get out. It's very, you know, if you say this isn't for me, if you even had those thoughts, which I didn't have no such thoughts. I mean, I knew I didn't like it, but I knew this is my lot in life and this is what I have to do, just like my father before me.
When you go into boot camp, you come in as many individuals. When you come out of boot camp, you come out as one. You think the same way. You react the same way.
So boot camp was old Corps. It wasn't like it is now, meaning that they would beat the shit out of you. I mean, they would punch you, they would lock you in things, they would, I mean, it was brutal. But I liked it.
That's where they brainwash you. That's what I call it. That's what it is. They brain. That's why they cut your hair. That's why everybody's in the same greens, because they clean out your past memory if they can, your youth, and basically they try to make you a jungle killer and guerrilla fighter, because that's the focus. Okay, I mean, that's their mission.
I just thought this was something that we had to do. It was a duty for being a citizen of the United States. I did not know that they paid us. You know, I figured they give us clothes and they house us and they feed us, and so it's even Steven, right? And so after 30 days in the military, one day, instead of training, they send us into an office and they tell us what to do. You know, walk in there, salute the officer and report, you know. And so I did, and they gave us a paycheck. And, you know, I was like, wow, you know. And I think it was something like $93 or something. I don't remember exactly, but that's how naive I was about the whole process.
Basic training was 8 weeks at MCRD San Diego. The first 4 weeks they spent just breaking us, you know, stop thinking as a civilian. The second 4 weeks that we were trained on the history of the Marine Corps and how to kill. That was basically it. When you were trained as a Marine, you're trained to kill.
The Army does such a great job of breaking you down and remolding you, turning you into what they would call a fighting machine. That by the time, like 4 months of training, they got you pretty much dialed in to where if you didn't get orders for Vietnam, you're going to be disappointed.
And I put in my mind, okay, I'm going to Vietnam, but guess what? I'm going to be trained and I'm going to listen because I'm coming back. That was my mindset. I am coming back. The military service is all screwed up in this sense. The MOS, which is your job classification. If you're a cook, if you're a chef, say, or you're a cook out here as a civilian, when you go to the service, they'll make you a mechanic. And if you were a good mechanic out here, guess what? You're going to be a chef. They're all screwed up.
One of the true stories about Vietnam is the stench. The first breath you get, like, you know, everybody does a double take, you know, because the smell.
It was hot. How hot and sticky, and the smell.
The odor was diesel, you know, because, you know, we when we went to the bathrooms, the outhouses, we burned that waste, you know. The whole country had that burning everywhere. Death was in the air.
So they take the dead, they take the wounded, and then those that just hop in because they're alive and well, and they go back. That hits you like a ton of bricks.
I got off the plane. I've got my sea bag with me, and there's guys rushing people on stretchers onto helicopters, and there's trucks racing by you, and there's jets taking off constantly around you, and it was like, and I looked at this and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to survive on a 13 months tour of duty here.
It was just one of apprehension, I guess. You know, I mean, because you don't know what's going to happen. There was guys that were leaving too. You know, we're getting off, you know. We have 365 days left. And, you know, you just don't know if you're going to make it or not.
And right then I realized, I mean, it was so plain and open to me that that all-American boy ideal of John Wayne, Machine Gun Nest, Sans Iwo Jima, and all that kind of stuff. I realized right then, I cut through the bullshit and realized right then, I wasn't fighting for my country. I would be fighting for the next 13 months just to stay alive.
As you get off the plane, you see these guys that are leaving, and some of them will say, good luck. Some of them will say, be careful. But for the most part, most of them are pretty quiet. Some of them looking down, but they give you that stare. And you don't know what that is. I didn't know what it is because I hadn't been in combat. The only thing was that's weird. That's a weird stare. Those guys aren't the same guys. You do know that from the stories I got from my buddies that had been there. Okay, but they were stories. I had lived it. That was and the heat that hit me. Bam! Oh Lord, that was hot. I never been in weather that hot. You know, that was my introduction to landing there.
Everything just kind of conspired to give you this double take of your first breath of air in Vietnam.
When you're a Marine, the first thing is the mission. You do whatever you have to do to complete the mission. You can't second guess anything. You're given an order, you do it. That's all there is to it. When I got to Vietnam, they asked me if I wanted to stay with Recon. And I told them no, because I'd rather be with a full company and not just a 6-man team. So they assigned me to the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines up in Dong Ha. When I got to Dong Ha, I checked in, and since I was a radio operator, they assigned me to mortars. Our job was to be near the captain and to call in any missions to protect the patrol, whether it was a company-size patrol, a platoon size, or just a squad size. We were there to call in any mortars primarily. Secondary was artillery, and then if we had to, naval gunfire. That night, the engineers were in the process of expanding out the fire zone, the clearing area. So they took down some of the barbed wire, and they were in the process of doing that. Well, on May the 8th, about 3 o'clock in the morning, we got hit with artillery and rockets. It was about a half hour of shelling. And that was followed by the suicide squad that came in strapped with explosives. They would jump on the barbed wire that was still standing and blow themselves up. And then the ground troops came in after them. There was about 400 of us and almost 2 divisions of North Vietnamese. So it was 400 of us against 2,000 of them. You're not really prepared, but you are. It's all instinct. A friend of mine, Larry, who was the other radio operator, the guy that was on watch with the M60 machine gun panicked and forgot to throw off the safety of his gun. He couldn't get the gun to fire. Larry ran over there, knocked him out of the way, threw the safety off, and mowed down the first couple of layers of guys coming in. That's what helped save our side. But it soon got to the point where they were in our trenches and everything. It was down to hand to hand. You know, it was just every man for themselves, really. It was still going on after the sun came up, because you've got guys out there, these North Vietnamese are laying like they're dead, but they're not. They're waiting for you not to look so they can take off. But we had guys go out beyond the lines and check them. And like there was one guy laying there, and we asked, do dead men sweat? Because this guy was sitting there laying there, and he was just sweating away. Turns out he was alive. It was actually the North Vietnamese, and on Con Tien, we were actually fighting North Vietnamese and Chinese, because we had 30 Chinese that we had killed that night. And when the reporters came in the next morning after the battle, they wouldn't take pictures of the Chinese that we had 30 of them piled there. Reporters said that the people back home didn't need to know about the Chinese. And all these Chinese were over 6 feet tall. They were big guys.
We were an infantry unit. When I first got assigned to my unit, they made me a grenadier. I carried the M79 grenade launcher. I did that for about 6 months. Then they made me platoon RTO. I was RTO for my platoon leader. And I did that for about 3 months. Then they made me a squad leader. The one thing that a lot of people don't realize is the physicalness of being an infantryman in Vietnam, because you're not fighting every day. I mean, you're not fighting every day. And what you're doing is, helicopter drops you off, and you start walking. You know, you're walking 2 or 3 clicks. You do what's called clover leaves. Company command group is one place. Then you would do, each platoon would do what's called a clover leaf, searching for the enemy. Then once you finish that, you'd move to another area, do the same thing. Okay. Now, what the physicalness of it was, you set up at night. Okay. You set up a night defense position to be like circle, just like the cowboys and the Indians back in the old days. Dig a hole. It's normally 3-man positions. Okay. So there'd be a hole, just digging up for 3 guys to fit in. And one guy would be on guard, and the other 2 guys would sleep okay? So you'd basically be on guard for 1 hour, sleep for 2. On guard for 1 hour, sleep for 2. And so basically you didn't get all that much sleep. So when you did take a break, say you're on a trail or something like that, you'd always take a little cat nap,
I was assigned a unit, mobile artillery unit, 8mm guns and 175mm artillery pieces. And then, but my particular battery, they call it in the artillery, they called it batteries, was in a place called Swan Lock. This is my first day, not my first day in Vietnam, but my first day with my unit. During the night, they had what they call H&I rounds. And H&I stood for, I think it stood for something like harassment and interdictment. And what they were targets of suspected enemy activity. And they would give us orders like, we want you to bomb this place. We want you to put some artillery on this place at 11 o'clock at night, and do it again at 1, and then do it again at 3. So we did this. We did this for probably about 20 minutes. At the end of the 20 minutes, I was drenched in sweat. I was wore out. I was feeling bad because I felt like I'm slowing down my unit, you know, and I want to contribute, you know. And so the other guys, they all went and said, okay, we don't have to do this again until 1 in the morning, so we're going to go sleep. I needed to cool off. I stayed around the gun and I just sat there and let the air cool me off and think about, you know, wow, you know, that was something I've never done before. And I remember our sergeant had left right after that, and he went to a place called Fire Direction Control. And we had been told that this area that we were bombing that night was outside of a village. And about midnight, about an hour later, that sergeant, I still remember his name, remember where he was from. He came back and he says, you know that field outside the village we were supposed to hit? He goes, yeah. He's telling me this because I'm the only one up. He says, we missed our target. We hit the village. And, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking women and children, innocent people, you know, devastated by this artillery barrage. And I mean, I had a hard time dealing with that, you know, very, very hard time knowing that. And then I kind of told myself, this is what my year is going to be like. Get used to it. This is war.
While I was still serving with the Cav, we were assigned to go near the Cambodian border. And this was C Troop in the 1st Squadron. We were we set up base camp. It was getting dark, and we set up base camp in a circular manner. And as the sun was going down, we were all gathered together. And we were told, because we were so close to Cambodia, we could not go into Cambodia, and that no people would be leaving the area. There would be no patrols going out that night. And we said, great, we're good to go. My guard duty on top of our vehicle, behind the 50 caliber, was just before dawn. I saw a line of people coming towards me. There must have been about 5 or 6. And I cocked the gun back, and it's not a trigger on the 50 caliber, but there's thumb triggers. And I looked. To this day, I do not know why I didn't fire. They came on. They were our soldiers. And they walked by me, and they looked up and said hi, and I thought, guys did not know how close they'd come to dying that day. I have no idea why I did not fire, other than I must have recognized the gait. That it was, if there's such a thing as an American gait versus a Vietnamese gait, and maybe I thought that they were upright and they weren't trying to sneak in, but I didn't fire. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I could have killed those guys easily. I mean, they were like the proverbial ducks in a row. And yeah, that's a tough one. That is a very tough one. Luckily, I had the presence of mind, but oh man, how long has it been since I thought of that one?
Then we dug in around the rice paddy, and that's when I had my first friend get killed. It was about my 5th or 6th day in country, and loved this kid. Just met him, but you would love this kid. His name was Bean, African American kid, and he was a private. And he had the best smile I've ever seen in my life. And he came over to me. We're dug in, and he goes, "I'm going to be out on an LP, a listening post." He says, "Out there." He said, "Don't shoot my ass." And I said, "I won't." And I said, "You be safe out there." And he goes, "I will." And I watched him walk away. And then that night, a grenade went off. And I knew it wasn't a mortar round because we didn't hear a tube and we didn't hear a swoosh coming in. And boom! And all of a sudden I heard, "Corman, Corman." And then the next thing I knew, it was just a series of events. It was mud, sticky mud. And my favorite corpsman, Doc, ran past, and he came running up to me, and he said, "Bean's been hit, you gotta help me." And the Marines came over, and they set Bean down in my lap. And what happened was that when he told the next hole that he's gonna be out there, the guy didn't tell the next guy who was asleep on his watch. He heard movement, and he threw a grenade. And so Bean, I couldn't even recognize Bean. And he was in my lap, and the corpsman's trying to save him, and he goes, and he's swelling. I mean, his head was like this. His face was pulled so tight, I couldn't even see him. The only way I knew it was Bean is because he's the only guy in our company that wore white socks with 2 red stripes on them. And I kept looking at his face, and I'm going, "This can't be Bean." And I'm looking at his socks going, "It's fucking Bean." I'm going back and forth and back and forth. Finally, the doc says, his throat is just swelling, and the doc says, we gotta give him a trach. And so he took his pen out, and he took a scalpel, and he made an incision. He put the pen in Bean's throat, and he was breathing till he couldn't breathe anymore. And then he said, "Take over." And so I was breathing, and we just did that and did that and did that. And then he finally took it out, and he says, "We lost Bean." And I don't know how they took him away. I don't remember that at all. I just remember sitting squats with my legs kneeling in the mud, and I had Bean's blood on my pants, and it was raining. And I remember that night where I just thought, I was, number one, so pissed. Number two, me and a lot of other guys were ready to kill the guy that was in the next hole. And fortunately, they took him out the next day. I never saw him again. They flew him somewhere else. And I pity him for having to live with this all his life. And three, I realized that, later, like a couple of decades later, that Bean really sort of saved my life in a way, because it affected me so much emotionally to have my first friend die in my arms, that suddenly it just closed off my emotions to it, to where when people died, they died. And if you won that day, you lived. And if you lost that day, you died.
We hear that one of the companies got an NVA company cut off someplace, so we get helicopters that's going to take us to be a blocking force. Well, unfortunately, the helicopters dropped us off, and I still remember this. I look to my left, I'm right on the helicopter. I see a gunship get shot down. See another gunship get shot down. They dropped us. I mean, we had to jump off the helicopters, but they dropped us in the middle of a NVA regiment. And then they ended up shooting down an F-4 Phantom, and they had so many machine guns, I mean, anti-aircraft weapons there. And then we actually went there. We fought constantly, every day for a week. It's the longest we ever fought. It was every day for a week. So our company was there. Another couple of companies from our battalion. There was another battalion there. We tried to take this one hill, and we couldn't take it. I mean, we didn't have enough people, and we were out of water. I mean, you're drinking the water, and they couldn't get resupply to us. There's too many anti-aircraft guns, so they couldn't resupply us. At least not right away. And I still remember waking up in the morning and the dew that you found on the leaves, licking that so you could have some water.
We're marching on this road, and it goes like this. The hill goes up and we're marching. I'm right here. I see this guy, his head as this goes up over the hill, and I'm marching behind him, you know. Next thing I know, within seconds, not even a minute, boom, I said, oh shit, booby trap. Sure enough, we all yell, we all fall down, and somebody yells, booby trap, this whole road is booby trap. So what are we doing on the road now? Well, we wait till they clean it up with a chopper, the medevac takes them out, and then we continue on the road. I said, wait a minute, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You already know it's all booby trap. Well, we have to stay on the road, because if you go to the sides, you know it's going to be worse. They bring in the chopper, they take the guy, and what's the story? Down the line, what's the story? He lost his one leg. He lost his leg completely, but he seems to be okay. So then we got to walk over the hill, and you see the big old hole and full of blood, and I'm saying, Jesus Christ. That is the trauma that gets to your head, man, that is so hard to get rid of, you know. And then you start thinking, like many guys, oh, I know I'm not going to make it. I know I'm not going to make it. When you get guys around you like that, you just don't get the F out of my, get out of here, man. You're bad luck. You don't talk about that. Don't think that way. But you do. I didn't think that way. I was still focused. I'm a survivor. I'm not going to die. And when I saw that, I did get scared. And I must admit, I was walking a little more careful. But after a few hours, you know, you go back to the same thing. It's already late. It's starting to get dark. And the sergeant says, we're going to stay here. We got to dig enough hole, and we're going to stay here. And we said, wait a minute. What do you mean dig? This is full of mines around here. Well, those are the orders. And I said, well, and you know, I'm not the only one that says bullshit orders. You know, we never see this guy. He comes in the chopper, he gives these orders, and he never comes down. He's not going to be stepping on the damn landmines. Well, then it happened, you know. Me and Madsen. I was 20, he was 19. I was going on 21, he was 19. No, not married, no children. And me and him are inside a hole we've dug already with the shovels, you know, and so the hole couldn't be 3.5, 4 feet. So, you know, we're pretty close. And we got these shovels, and we had taken off all our not clothes. All we had was our boots and our pants because it's too hot. And when you're doing physical work, it's worse. We didn't even have flak jackets or anything for metal. And next thing I know, you know, I'm facing this way, he's facing that way. I step on a mine, just like that. Boom, right there in the hole. Part of the hole, I guess, had been dug, I don't know. And this thing just, boom, blows up. The hole was big, but after that bomb, it was worse. Boom, you know, I said, shit. All I remember was the boom, an ugly sound, and the sound of death, of somebody yelling, which was a combination of me and him, I'm sure, of death. And I landed, I don't know, I'd say a good 15 feet away from the hole. I could barely see the hole. At that moment, I couldn't remember that Madsen was with me. I couldn't remember right away. And all I remember was medic. Oh, I got the morphine, one of the ones that I had. I shot it on my leg that was really hurting. And I said, medic. The medic started getting near, and then there was a rock, and he climbed on the rock. He said, they used to call me Gut. Most of them were Anglos. They couldn't pronounce Gutierrez, so they shortened it to G-U-T, Gut. So that was my nickname out there. Gut, he says, I'm going to be in this rock, you know, you're not too far. Why don't you, you know, kind of crawl towards me? I said, come on, dude. You know, I was almost, you know, but I started doing it. And as I started crawling on the floor for the first time, I realized that Madsen had gotten hit also, because I saw what appeared to be a knee and a leg right there. And it hit me like, I don't know what, you know. That's war. That's war. That's the trauma that stays with you. Right after I got hit, I landed laying face up, looking up. And I'm looking up, but I didn't have the courage to look at myself because I couldn't feel anything from my waist down. And being macho like everybody else, and the stories, you know, they like to take your privates out, or your legs, or your arms. And I said, my God. So I don't have the courage to look at my arms or look at my legs. But I know that it's possibly from my waist down because I can't feel anything. But I'm a survivor. I'm not going to die, because guys die from shock. So many guys died not from their wounds, but from shock. They go into shock and you die. I remember what I said from the beginning. I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna die. So what do? This is before the guy came and took me out. I wiggle my toes and I said, my feet are there. I wiggle my toes and then slowly but surely I look down. Both my feet are there, my legs, everything. I look to the side. My hands are there. I said, it's okay. But what I couldn't understand, and this eventually got to my mom, the guy was so close to me, Manson, that all those body parts, his skin and the blood splashed me all over my body. So I was full not only of my wounds, but body parts and meat and flesh and blood from him. So when the guy that came in, the medevac guy whose job is to write an incident report, and obviously that's how stupid it is, the government, that is what got to my mom in a Western Union mailogram.
I had very interesting psychic things happen when I was in the war that would tell me to stand a foot here rather than there, and it saved my life. I remember I saddled up, I got my guys out. We even had a tank come up to get him out. And we had a whole company of guys who were going to go out and get him. And my squad was already set up, and I remember looking at everybody, getting ready to go through the zigzag of the concertina wire at Cantien. And I remember looking at this one guy across from me. I don't even know who he was. And all of a sudden, he just turned into a black silhouette with this like gray airbrush, soft edge around him. And I looked at this, and I looked at other people, and I looked at this, and it was like, I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? So I looked at it, and then we just had to go. We went out, and he ended up getting killed. And so the next time it happened 3 times. The next time it happened again, just out of the blue. It was just like a surprise. And I look over and I see this silhouette of this guy. I can't see him, I just see this black silhouette of him, like a negative. And he got killed. And about a month later, it happened again. And I'm standing there, I'm thinking, I'm going fucking crazy. What is going on here? And then this voice came through, and it was a feminine voice. And the voice said, simply, all it said, and it was so profound, in the midst of everything that was going on, all of a sudden I didn't hear anything. It was just silence, and the voice came through, and she just said, don't stand next to them. Boom, that was it. And he got killed. And then after that, I didn't see it anymore.
My leg was just shaking, you know. And I said, oh God, I said, I'm gonna die. Is this where I'm gonna die? You know, I'm not gonna see my mother and my brother. You know, I'm not gonna have any kids. You know, and so we're firing. You know, and all of a sudden everything went blank. Being brought up Catholic, you know, I was bringing up all the santos. You know, the Virgen de Guadalupe. You know, you name it, any saint that, you know, San Martin, Santuchas, well, you know, anybody, you know, that I was coming out of my mind, you know, and well, that's where we were brought up. I said, Jesus, is this where I'm gonna die, you know? At the same time, you were pulling out grenades and then, you know, trying to switch over and firing and then lobbing the grenades, you know, and then you could feel the grenade boom and then the explosion, and all of a sudden everything got quiet, you know. And I said, man, I'm dead, you know, and then, so I kept firing. I said, Jesucristo, and I said, who in the hell are you? You're nobody, you know, because you're brought up with santos, you know, and I said, you're nobody, you know. So I kept firing, you know, and then, but I couldn't hear anything, you know. And I said, Jesucristo, and I denied him again, you know, and then. And the third time I said, Jesucristo, and I said, you know what, you're nobody, you know. So I just kept firing, but I couldn't hear, you know, but I could hear the concussion of the grenades in my body, you know. And then we were looking east, and the sun was coming through, and a lot of dirt was flying, you know, dropping off the trees, you know, and you know, what happened was all of a sudden I seen this image coming toward me, you know. And I looked up, you know, and I was still firing, you know, and I was looking at my rifle like this to see if the shells were coming out, you know, and the shells were coming out, you know. But I looked up, and I could see this image coming toward me, you know, and I looked at him, you know, and I looked at this image, you know, and I said, he says, mijo, he says, don't you know that I'll never leave you nor forsake you? I said, who in the hell are you? You're nobody, you know. And he says, I believe it was Thomas that denied him. He says, oh, you know, until I see him, that, you know, and I could put my finger in his hand. And he says, just like Thomas, you know, he says, and he had a robe on, you know, but I couldn't see his face, you know, but it was like lit, you know, all the way around. But you could see his robe, you know, and then you could see the rope or whatever they call it, and you could see his feet, you know, and then he says, mijo, he says, and he reached out like this to me, and he says, mijo, he says, put your finger in my wound, you know, and like a fool, you know, and here's a 60 man shooting at my feet, and I'm here firing, and I'm going like this, you know, just reaching out like this, you know, and this guy's looking at me like, what the F's happened to this guy, man, you know, and so I reached out like this, and then it was gone, you know. Then I knew I wasn't gonna die, you know. So I jumped up and I went up, and we ended up killing five out of the six enemies.
We had a recon team that got hit, and they tried to get extracted, and the helicopter came in and tried to extract them, and the helicopter got shot down. And so they were surrounded, recon team, about 7, 8, 9 guys, surrounded by a couple of platoons of North Vietnamese that were closing in on them. We could hear the firefight. It was only 1,000 meters away. And you hear those AK-47s just riddling that chopper. And so we got called up immediately. We had to go out and save these guys. And that's when it's scary, because you hear the battle going on. You know you're walking into it already, and your adrenaline's pumping. You've got that fear in your stomach, which I think is a good thing, because it makes you a lot more aware. And when the shit hits the fan, it was like, for me, it was always like 360 degree, I could see 360 degrees. Everything was in black and white and in slow motion, and it was the most surreal experience.
A brand new experience that you never had, never expected to have, and here you were. Yeah. People come in with their legs off, arms off, other things off. We had, I don't know, 3 or 4 casualties come in at the same time, and they'd been in a helicopter, and they'd been shot right through the bottom of their seats, and so they were mortally wounded, and you were supposed to call the chaplain every time you had casualties come in, and I guess we dropped the ball and didn't do that, and I just snapped at him and said, I thought maybe you might want something live to pray over. He didn't care for that line. And so then I was transferred to post-op, or this ICU. Yeah.
And he says, look, just look around. And I look around. Oh my God, this hangar full of thousands of guys. I thought I was bad. And what does he do? He's sitting there. He'd been there for a few days or a week or whatever. He says, oh man, you're the guy over there, the guy over there. They took out his, his privates out there. He shot out. And I see a guy walking there, almost half of his face blown. I'm saying, oh my God. You talk about a traumatic experience. And seeing all these guys, it really got to me, like, Jesus Christ.
So how did I deal with the fear of being killed? You just run your ass off. You fire as many rounds as you possibly can. You keep your head down, and you throw as many hand grenades as you can. You know, I mean, it's just like you are on survival mode. And it's like when you're actually in it, there's not even any fear. You're just doing it.
And the guys would talk about, there's not a bullet in Vietnam that has my name on it, you know. They talk about it like that, and then finally, yeah, well, this is a bullet that had his name on it. And
there's this one guy, his name was Ben Jowers. Found out later his name was Ben Jowers. Little short black guy. And we're out there talking, and he says, you know, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, I took that with a grain of salt. The next morning, his squad was on a patrol. A sniper hit with one of his hand grenades, I guess it didn't hit the blasting cap, and blew him in half. He was killed. And I just remember that. It was his time to go.
Yeah, you're there 6-8 months, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I haven't been hurt yet, so, and you just take chances that you shouldn't take. You start doing things without thinking about it. You know, it's hard to explain. You just think that you're indestructible. That's it.
it was about 3 o'clock when we finally was able to get to that helicopter, and I had my stuff, and we rose up out of it, and I'm looking down at the jungle, and it was so beautiful. It was just beautiful. But I knew that underneath all of that, it's hell, you know.
Right before Christmas, I got wounded the first time, shrapnel through the shoulder blade from a mortar round right behind me. Second time was when the North Vietnamese stood up in the ambush and threw a hand grenade at me, and I got blast concussion and thrown and really screwed up my lower back. Third time was this hellacious battle fighting North Vietnamese and Red Chinese Marines, and got hit with a shrapnel from a mortar round that hit me in the cheek. Picked me up, tossed me about 6 feet on my hands and knees. I remember looking at the ground. I didn't know how bad I was hit. I could not hear, and I was stunned. It was just silence in the midst of chaos. And I remember watching this beautiful puddle of blood, red, starting to form on the jungle floor. And I reached up, my face was all bloody, and I thought, that's my third Purple Heart. I'm fucking out of here.
We're going out to the plane, and there's mortars hitting the air base. Okay. So even as we're taxiing, I'm looking out the window, and there's explosions all around us, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, I survived 18 months. I'm gonna get blown up going home, right?
The moment that plane lifts up off the ground, the place bursts into applause. Everybody's happy. And the stewardesses come down with alcohol, champagne and stuff. And most of us weren't even of the drinking age yet. I was 19, you know, and I'm flying back from war.
Well, nobody called me a baby killer. Nobody congratulated me. And when I came back, to tell you the truth, I mean, I really wasn't looking to be congratulated. And I really wasn't looking to be, you know, ticker tape parades or anything. I just wanted to get back. And when I got back, immediately I grew out my hair, grew a Fu Manchu, got my bell bottoms on, and started painting.
But the hardest part was that the guys that I went through school, and the guys that were going to go with me, as a group that we were going to go, are the ones that turned on me, you know. You stupid motherfucker, you know, who told you to go? Nobody asked you to go, you know, you dumb fuck, you know, and that's the way they treated. I don't want to hear your shit, man, you know, and so yeah, I was isolated. Isolated, you know,
and it hit me like a ton of bricks, like, Jesus Christ, and these people really believe. And me and my mom finally walked, and we got up to the altar. My mom grabbed my hand, and very hard, you know, like to thank the Virgen that I was back. And this, I don't know what it was, just all over inside my body, and just, I guess that's what faith was. She transferred her faith to me at that moment, like, Jesus Christ. And at that moment, the least I can do was to thank the Virgen and remember my friend Madsen, you know, like. And then that's probably the first time that I really said something as a question to myself that I didn't understand. Why him and not me? I don't know. I didn't know then. Why him and not me? But I thanked her, you know, I'm here. And my mom left us probably about 6-7 months after that, you know. Those are the things that I remember.
Other than those few people, I just totally hid the fact that I had been in the Army and I had been in Vietnam. I tried to put it behind me by denying my service. And I got out in April of '69. My wife, who I married in June of 1970, knew I'd been in the service, but I never talked about anything. It wasn't until July 2010 when the Vietnam Veterans of Ventura County had the moving wall, which is a replica of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington at Ivy Lawn, that I realized I needed help. And it was difficult for me even to admit that, because I still felt I was being victimized by Vietnam, and I didn't want to be. I wanted it to be all over. But I guess denying it doesn't make it go away.
When I sent for my military records last year, I asked for those psychiatrist records and they didn't come. You know, they didn't come at all. And there's this, in the Army, there's this story about a fire that happened that took out a lot of people's records, you know.
My back was so screwed up when I got back, and it would go out on me to where I couldn't walk. And so I had 2 roommates, and it went out on me one night, and it was in December, and ice cold outside, and we were in the valley in Sepulveda, and I couldn't walk. And so they picked me up, put me in the car, and a lot of pain. Got to the VA down by UCLA, and got in, wouldn't even check me in. They go, you know, it's going to take at least an hour to check you in. And they put me the VA put me in a wheelchair and put me next to an open door that was about 38 degrees outside, and let me sit there for an hour. And finally, my 2 roommates demanded that they take me in, and they just blew them off. So they took me back, and then the next day I went to my own doctor. And then I went back one other time because I could hear the explosion. The third time I got wounded, the explosion was so loud it really blew out this eardrum. And so I went back to try and get some disability for 3 Purple Hearts, and especially in my back, and to hopefully get a hearing aid or whatever from loss of hearing. Went back, they did a hearing test, they said no, nothing. They said good luck, and that was it. And so I never went back to them, never.
Much, 40 years later, just recently, it's me going to the VA is something that's happened over the last couple of years. Unlike the soldiers today coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, they're going right into the VA system. The Vietnam veterans, I mean, think about it. It took them how long to even come up with the term PTSD?
Well, just the Marine Corps itself taught me how to survive. I've always used that training in everything I do. The bad was the PTSD that I didn't know about, nobody talked about, was building up. And I couldn't figure out why I was getting into all these fights and stuff, arguments and stuff. You know, there was something bugging me that I didn't know. It was hard to explain. It was around 1980. One day I woke up and looked at my wife and I said, I don't want to be here anymore. And all of our friends thought I was going through a midlife crisis. And it's just, I had no purpose in life anymore. I left. And they said, well, why, why you, I said, I can't tell you. I just, she was a good wife, good mother, but I just didn't want to be there. And that's when the PTSD started coming out. And it just kind of lost control after that.
They about an uncle in World War II. Oh, Uncle Louie's that way because he's shell-shocked from the war. That's really a heavy statement. Uncle Louie was heavily damaged by the war experience. I mean, war is trauma. And how can you as a young person experience trauma after trauma after trauma almost on a daily basis for X amount of time and then come out the other end and be okay? We're not okay. We didn't come back okay. We're damaged. Whether or not we want to admit it, our wives, our girlfriends they'll tell you, yeah, you're damaged. They see all your disorders, your sleeping disorders, your angers, your eating disorders. There's all of these things that have medical terms to them now. That just used to be us. Yeah, I'm just another human, two-legged human being, but we were damaged.
So I applied for my benefits, or my entitlements actually, in July 2010. It wasn't until October 2012 that I got them. And I'm now rated at 80% disabled. And a large portion of that is not only due to Agent Orange, but is my PTSD. And I'm glad I'm getting help now. And I find there's still things I can't face or talk about. Whether I'm still being victimized by them or not, I don't know, I'm not sure.
There's even movies now glorifying this, damaged individuals. There's one movie that's very popular right now today that we could go down and see, that they're making the guy who was a really American sniper. The real guy that happened to was a really damaged individual. But you go see the movie and you come out feeling good about our whole mission. See, that's what we were doing over there. We were doing two things. We were protecting the American political myth. That's always been there. It's a myth. And then for economic reasons. War is good business. A lot of boots got to get made. A lot of munitions got to get made. A lot of people get employed. So there's that to consider.
I don't know why we were there. To tell you the truth, I don't know why. All I know is I wasn't fighting for my country. All I know is that when I was there, I was fighting for the two guys next to me, or my squad, and I'll be damned if I was gonna, get them killed, and do everything I could do so that we all could survive and get the fuck out of there.
I don't know. I mean, if they're telling us that, we're fighting, for the Vietnamese, from freedom, from oppressed, and all that stuff, man, half the Vietnamese I met could care less. They don't care what flag is on the pole. They care about, give me my rice, give me my fish, leave me alone.
If you don't win the hearts and mind of the people you're going to help, you'll never win the war. You'll go there and try to bomb some sense into them, like the saying was in Vietnam. We're going to come in here and bomb and bomb and bomb, even if they have to kill you, to make this a democratic country.
What I wanted to do, being that my father was a World War II veteran, I wanted to honor his memory because he was a member of the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and American Legion. And I remember growing up, going to a lot of parties and dances at either place, the American Legion Hall or the VFW. So I figured, in honor of my father, I'm going to join. And I went over to VFW to join. This is probably, I got out in December 1969. This is probably January 1970. I was just fresh back out of the military and everything. And my intentions are to join. And there was a reluctancy on the guy's part, and he says, well, technically, son, you're not really a veteran of a foreign war because war was never declared in Vietnam. And that hit me like a bucket of ice water being thrown on me. And so I left there really, really hurt. And I got the same chilly reception at the American Legion. Same thing, an organization ran by guys from World War II. And so I cast my lot with the only Vietnam organization or veterans organization that would have me the way I was and accept me, and that was the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I joined their side, and I'm still on their side.
I spent the last 28 years working with vets, through the Vietnam vets. I've had my share of stuff. I've had guys call me up in the middle of the night, and as they're talking to you, you can hear them cocking the gun back and forth.
Is the surreal thing that you live through, is the reality, is the ugliness, is death. Smelling death, seeing death. Nobody knows that. So when people talk and give opinions about war, be it family, be it no disrespect to other veterans, but if they haven't been in a war zone, they don't know what they're talking about other than stories they've heard or read about, and especially politicians. Especially politicians, and especially more the hawks, the people that I don't say love war, but they talk about war as if they've been there and they've never been there, and they've supported it like that.
My feeling was, and still is, and to this day with the war, is that we send our guys in to become bullet stoppers in Hamburger, and the best of the best. And you have your pudgy assholes like Cheney and all those people who sit back and make billions of dollars off the war effort. And what is it for? It's not fighting for your country. It's not stopping this. It's not stopping that. It's not what you're indoctrinated with, and the constant hypnosis that the military puts on you before you go into battle about the enemy is non-human. They don't have any emotions. It's this, that. It takes a long time to get over that. And when I came back ultra left. I came back anti-war. And I came back an activist.
I got all that, I think, from Vietnam. I think I got some very positive things from Vietnam. Of course, it has a price tag on it. And I'm still making payments. But I think, bottom line, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it.
There's one side that has, let's just say, some frustration and bitterness about the experience. Then there's another side that wants, forgiveness and letting go, like that. A tension between the two. And forgiving is a chore, like forgiving ourselves, forgiving the military, forgiving our society that allowed that to happen, forgiving who needs to be forgiven. But between the two, there's a flow that I've discovered, that I could just get into the flow of life and make it and pick up the pieces and enjoy the rest of my life. And that's what I'm trying to do.
One of the guys I went to training with was this guy by the name of Larry Baker. And when we were going through training, we voted Larry Baker the person most likely to get killed first. On the way back from Vietnam, I was next to Larry Baker. He made it.
My fellow Americans,
I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy.
100 men will test today, but only 3 when the green beret.
Rebels drove deeper into Laos today, pushing government troops across.
We gotta get out of this place if it's the last thing we ever do.
The enemy very deceitfully has taken advantage of the